They thought the stroke had taken everything from me. They thought a man who could barely button his own shirt couldn't still read a contract, couldn't still remember what was in his own safe, couldn't still notice the way his wife's voice changed when she answered certain phone calls. They were wrong about all of it. But I let them keep being wrong, because being underestimated is the closest thing a man over 60 has to a superpower. My name doesn't matter much for what I'm about to tell you. What matters is that I spent 41 years married to a woman I once would have walked into traffic for. We met in 1982 outside a movie theater in Charleston. She was waiting for a friend who never showed up, and I was waiting for the rain to stop. I bought her a coffee at the diner across the street, and within 6 months she was wearing my grandmother's ring. We built a life, a real one. I worked as a structural engineer, mostly bridges and water towers, the kind of work nobody notices unless something goes wrong. She taught middle school art for 22 years. We bought a craftsman bungalow in West Asheville back when you could still afford 1-on-2 modest salaries, and we raised one son in it. Or so I believed for 26 years. His name was Caleb. He's the reason I'm telling you this story instead of taking it to the grave. The stroke happened on a Tuesday in February of last year. I remember the date because I'd just finished a small consulting job for a contractor down in Hendersonville. I was 65, semi-retired, still doing structural inspections on the side because I couldn't quite let it go. I came home, sat down to read the paper, and the next thing I knew I was on the kitchen floor and my wife was screaming into the phone. It wasn't a bad one, as strokes go. A small bleed in the left frontal lobe. I lost some fine motor control in my right hand and developed a slight slur that came and went depending on how tired I was. Speech therapy helped. Physical therapy helped more. By August, I could write again, slowly, and I could walk 3 miles without my cane. But I never told them I'd recovered as much as I had. That wasn't a decision I made all at once. It happened in pieces. The first piece came 2 weeks after I got home from the hospital, when I heard my wife on the back porch talking to someone in a voice I hadn't heard her use with me in maybe 15 years. It was low and warm and a little bit musical, and she ended the call by saying, "I love you too, baby," soon. I was supposed to be asleep on the couch. I kept my eyes shut. I kept breathing slow and even. And I thought, well, there it is. Had known something was off for at least 3 years. The late returns from school auctions she'd stopped going to. The weekend in Savannah with her sister, when her actual sister called the house looking for her. The way she'd flinch when I touched her shoulder. Not from anger, but from something more like guilt being interrupted. I'd told myself I was being paranoid. I'd told myself a lot of things. The second piece came when Caleb started visiting more often. He'd just finished his master's at Duke and was working at some consulting firm in Charlotte. We'd never been close the way I wanted us to be. He was always closer to his mother, more like her, less like me. He had her temper and her tendency to dismiss what he didn't understand. Still, he was my son. He drove down from Charlotte on weekends now, brought groceries, talked to me slow and loud the way you talk to a dog that's gone deaf. One Saturday in late August, I was in the den, supposedly napping, when I heard him in the kitchen with his mother. "He keeps asking about the trust documents," she said. "Tell him you put them in the safe deposit box," Caleb said. "He won't remember by Tuesday." He remembered the dentist appointment last week. "Sometimes," Caleb said. "Not always. We just need a little more time." That's when I started writing things down. A small leather notebook I'd had since 1994. I kept it in the workshop behind the garage, in a coffee can on a shelf nobody touched. Every conversation I overheard. Every check I noticed missing from the register. Every time she came home with shopping bags from stores she'd never shopped at before. The third piece, the one that broke something open in me, came on a Thursday afternoon in September. I'd been sent to the den for my rest. She thought I was deep asleep. The man's voice in our living room was a baritone I didn't recognize, and I heard her laugh in a way she hadn't laughed with me since the Reagan administration. 2 more months, he said. Maybe 3. The lawyer says we can get the conservatorship pushed through by Christmas if his neurologist signs off. He won't fight it, she said. He doesn't even know what day it is half the time. And the boy? Caleb's fine. He's been brilliant, actually. The forged signature on the equity line went through Monday. Babe, the man said, you're a genius. I lay there on the couch with my eyes closed and my heart beating so hard I was afraid they'd see the pulse in my neck. I waited. I listened. I learned his name was Trent, and that he was something in commercial real estate down in Greenville. I learned they'd been together since 2019. I learned my wife had been bleeding our accounts dry for 2 years, hiding it behind charitable donations and home renovations and a fake LLC Caleb had set up in his 2nd year of grad school. I waited until they left the house before I let myself cry. I cried for about 10 minutes, hard. The ugly kind where your face doesn't look like itself. Then I washed my face, made a pot of coffee, and called Maeve Forrester. Maeve had been my best friend's wife. My best friend, Doug, died of pancreatic cancer in 2017. Before he died, he made me promise that if I ever needed a lawyer who would treat me like a person and not a billable hour, I'd call his widow. Maeve was 62, partner at her own small firm in downtown Asheville, and she had the kind of face that put juries at ease while she gutted opposing counsel under the table. I need to come see you, I told her. Quietly. Not at the office. Not on a phone line my wife could see on the bill. She didn't ask questions. She just said, tomorrow morning, the coffee shop on Haywood. I'll be there at 7. I told her everything. I sat in that coffee shop with my hands wrapped around a mug I couldn't quite feel, and I told her about the conversations and the missing money and the man named Trent and the way my own son had been helping plan my disappearance into a memory care facility. When I was done, she didn't say anything for a long minute. Then she said, how much have you saved? Officially, they've drained me down to about $80,000 in the joint accounts. Unofficially, I've been waiting for that question. Doug and I set up a trust in 2003. He was the only one who knew about it. I funded it from a separate consulting LLC I'd been running on the side since the 90s, money I never put through the household. By the time he died, there was just over $4 million in it. It's been earning since then. Maeve sat back. Doug never told me about that. He kept his promises. He did, she said. Her eyes got wet for a second and then she got back to work. Okay, here's what we're going to do. The next 4 months were the strangest of my life. On the outside, I became more impaired. I started forgetting things in front of my wife. I let her catch me wearing my sweater inside out. I asked her 3 times in one evening when our anniversary was. I let Caleb find me at the workbench in the garage, supposedly trying to assemble a birdhouse with the pieces in front of me arranged completely wrong. He took a picture of it. I saw him do it. I saw him send the picture to someone, probably the lawyer, probably his mother, probably both. On the inside, I was running an investigation. Maeve introduced me to a man named Augusto Reyes, a retired police detective who did private work for her firm. We met at his office above a bicycle shop on Charlotte Street. He had a gray ponytail and a wall full of citations in the calm, watchful expression of a man who had stopped being surprised by anything human beings did a long time ago. I'm sorry for what you're going through, he said. That was the first thing he said. Not, tell me about the case. Not, what do you need from me? Just, I'm sorry. I almost lost it again right there in his office. Augusto ran the financial trace. He found Trent Bishop, 51, twice divorced, 2 bankruptcies, currently leveraged to the eyeballs on a failed mixed-use development in Travelers Rest. He found the LLC Caleb had set up, registered to a P.O. box in Asheville but with a billing address that matched Trent's office. He found the wire transfers. He found the home equity line of credit that had been opened in my name 3 weeks after my stroke, while I was still in the rehabilitation center learning to use a fork again. The signature on the application looked like mine. It wasn't. He found the appointment my wife had made with a neurologist in Charlotte for a consultation about my decline set for the second week of January. The neurologist's office was 3 doors down from a law firm that specialized in elder guardianship petitions. And then, because I had asked him to, Augusto found one more thing. I'd suspected it for a long time, in the back of my mind, in the place where you keep the suspicions that would destroy your life if they turned out to be true. Caleb had never looked like me, not as a baby, not as a teenager, not as a man. He had my wife's coloring, sure, but the rest of him, the height and the heavy brow and the wide-set eyes, didn't come from her family or mine. I'd watched him grow up and told myself the resemblance would emerge. It never did. I gave Augusto a coffee cup Caleb had used during a Sunday visit. I gave him a hair from my own brush. He sent both to a lab in Atlanta. The results came back the third week of November. 0% probability of paternity. I read the email 3 times in the workshop with my reading glasses on, and then I took the reading glasses off and looked out the small window at the bare maple tree in my backyard, and I tried to remember what year it was when I'd first felt it. The first time I'd held him and known something was off and refused to know it. He was 3 weeks old. I'd been so happy and so afraid and so quietly, persistently certain that I was looking at another man's child. I'd loved him anyway. I'd loved him for 26 years anyway. That part wasn't going to change. But the part where I let his mother walk away with my life, with my house, with the money I'd earned bridging rivers I'd never see again, that part was over. I called Maeve. I told her I had everything we needed. "There's one more thing I want to do," I said. "What's that?" "I want to write her a letter." "To your wife?" "To the judge." She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Tell me what you have in mind." The court date was January 14th. My wife had filed for divorce on December 2nd, citing irreconcilable differences and the petitioner's diminished capacity to manage shared assets. She had requested an expedited hearing because of my deteriorating condition. Her lawyer was a man named Pendleton Vale, an oily piece of work from a firm in Hendersonville that specialized in extracting money from old men. She and Caleb had been preparing me for weeks, picking out my court clothes, which consisted of a baggy cardigan and slacks 2 sizes too large, reminding me what to say, coaching me on how to answer the judge. She wanted me to look exactly the way she'd been telling everyone I looked, a confused, declining old man who couldn't be trusted to sign his own checks. That morning, she laid the clothes out on the bed and said, "Remember, honey, just let the lawyers talk. You don't have to say anything. The judge is going to ask you some questions, and you just say what we practiced." "What did we practice?" I asked her. She smiled the patient smile I had come to hate. "We practiced saying that you trust me, honey, that you trust me to take care of everything." "Okay," I said. "Take care of everything." She kissed me on the forehead. She actually kissed me on the forehead, the way you kiss a child. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Trent picked her up at 9. He didn't come inside, but I watched from the front window as she got into his BMW and laughed at something he said. Caleb arrived 20 minutes later in his own car. He helped me into the passenger seat and made small talk about the weather all the way to the courthouse. "You doing okay, Dad?" he kept asking. "I'm okay, son." I called him son one last time. I gave him that. The courthouse in downtown Asheville is a 1928 Art Deco building with marble floors that echo when you walk on them. Caleb walked me through the metal detector and down the long hallway to courtroom 3. My wife was already there, sitting on the bench outside with Trent. They were holding hands. They didn't even bother to let go when they saw me coming. Caleb sat me down on the bench. He patted my knee. "It's gonna be fine, Dad. Just relax." Pendleton Vale came over, all teeth and cologne. "Mr. Renner," he said loudly, like I was deaf. "You remember our conversation last week about the proceedings?" "I remember our conversation last week about the proceedings." "I remember," I said. He turned to my wife. "I think he'll be fine." That's when Maeve walked around the corner. She was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my truck, and her hair was pinned back, and she was carrying a leather briefcase that had been her late husband's. She walked straight past Pendleton Vale without looking at him, came up to me, and said, "Good morning. Are you ready?" "Ready," I said. I stood up. My right knee held. My voice was steady. I strobed off the baggy cardigan and handed it to Caleb without looking at him. Underneath, I was wearing the navy suit Doug had helped me pick out for his daughter's wedding in 2014. Maeve had been holding it for me at her office for 3 weeks. I'd changed in the men's room while Caleb was parking the car. The look on my wife's face was something I'll remember on my deathbed. It wasn't fear yet. It was confusion. The kind of confusion that comes right before fear, when your brain is still trying to find the version of reality where what you're seeing makes sense. "What is this?" she said. She looked at Caleb. "What is he doing?" Caleb stood up. "Dad, sit down, son," I said, and I walked into the courtroom on my own 2 feet. The judge that morning was the Honorable Marlena Caldwell, a tall woman in her late 50s with iron gray hair and the patient, unimpressed expression of someone who had heard every variety of human dishonesty in 26 years on the bench. Maeve had been in front of her 100 times. I'd written her a letter by hand on yellow legal paper 3 days before the hearing. Maeve had filed it as a sealed exhibit along with everything else. We took our seats. Pendleton Vale looked at Maeve like he just swallowed a fly. He hadn't been told. None of them had been told. The first they knew that I had counsel was when she stood up and said, "Your Honor, Maeve Forrester for the respondent." My wife leaned over to whisper something to Trent, and Trent leaned back to whisper something to her, and I saw Caleb in the gallery sit very, very still. The judge looked over her glasses. "Mr. Vale, you may proceed." He proceeded. He laid out the petition. He described my diminished capacity. He submitted the affidavit from my wife. He produced a letter from a Charlotte neurologist I'd never met who had apparently signed off on a diagnosis based on a phone call. He requested an emergency conservatorship and an expedited division of marital assets in his client's favor pending the divorce. He spoke for about 20 minutes. The whole time he spoke, he kept glancing at me, waiting for me to look confused or fall asleep or drool on myself. I sat up straight and looked at him. When he finished, the judge said, "Ms. Forrester." Maeve stood up. "Your Honor, my client respectfully disputes every material claim in the petitioner's filing. We have submitted, under seal, a packet of evidence we'd ask the court to review before the petitioner's testimony. We also have a sealed letter from my client that we'd ask you to read at your convenience before this proceeding goes any further." "Objection," Pendleton Vale said, on his feet now. "Your Honor, we have not been given access to this letter or this evidence. This is highly irregular." "You have not been given access," Judge Caldwell said, "because Ms. Forrester filed it under seal 3 days ago, and I granted the seal, because the contents of the packet bear directly on the credibility of the petition itself. I will hear arguments after I've read it. The court will recess for 30 minutes. She picked up the envelope from her desk. As she stood to leave, she looked across the courtroom at my wife, who was now gripping Trent's hand hard enough to whiten her knuckles, and at Caleb in the second row, and finally at me. I gave her the smallest nod I could manage. She gave one back. The 30 minutes felt like 30 years. My wife tried to come over to my side of the room twice. The bailiff stopped her both times. Trent was on his phone, then off his phone, then trying to be on his phone again until the bailiff told him to put it away. Caleb just stared at the back of my head from his seat in the gallery. I didn't turn around. When Judge Caldwell came back into the courtroom, she was not laughing yet. That came later. She was wearing the face of a woman who has just been handed proof of something she has long suspected about the world. She sat down. She set the envelope to one side. She folded her hands. "Mr. Vale," she said, "I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd like you to answer it carefully. Did you or did you not advise your client to file documentation suggesting that the respondent has been mentally incompetent since February of last year? Your Honor, the medical evidence, that is not what I asked you. Did you advise your client to make that claim? Based on the evidence provided to me by my client, yes, Your Honor. And the home equity line of credit opened in the respondent's name on March 4th of last year, while the respondent was still hospitalized. Were you aware of that, Mr. Vale? I watched Pendleton Vale's face go the color of skim milk. Your Honor, I was not. And the LLC registered to your client's son billed to the address of a Mr. Tao, Trent Bishop in Greenville, South Carolina, into which approximately $1.6 million from the marital assets has been transferred over the past 22 months. Were you aware of that? I was not. The judge turned then, slowly, to my wife. Ma'am, she said, please stand. My wife stood. She was shaking now. The kind of shake that starts in the hands and works up. You filed a sworn affidavit in this court, Judge Caldwell said, stating that your husband has been mentally incapacitated since February of last year. I have in front of me a notarized contract he signed with the city of Hendersonville on January 30th, completing a structural review of a municipal water tower for which he was paid $6,400. I also have an email he sent on April 12th, 2 months after his stroke, to an engineering colleague in Knoxville in which he discusses load-bearing calculations for a residential project. I have a recording made by the respondent himself on October 17th of last year in which you and a Mr. Trent Bishop discuss, and I quote, getting the conservatorship pushed through by Christmas if his neurologist signs off. I have bank records. I have signature comparisons. I have a DNA test. She paused. She looked at my wife over her glasses. I want to be very clear with you, ma'am. There is no version of these proceedings in which this petition is granted. The only question remaining is whether you walk out of this courtroom under your own power or in handcuffs. I'm going to give you a moment to confer with your attorney. That's when she did it. That's when Judge Caldwell looked down at the letter on her desk, the letter I'd written by hand on yellow legal paper, and she shook her head once, and a small laugh escaped her. Just one laugh. Short and dry and entirely unprofessional. She caught herself and pressed her lips together, but I saw it. Everyone saw it. I had written in the letter at the very bottom, in my engineer's careful printing, Your Honor, if you are reading this, then my wife of 41 years has just stood in front of you and sworn that I am incompetent to manage my own affairs. I would like the record to reflect that I drafted this letter myself in my own handwriting with no assistance, and that I am also the holder of an irrevocable trust she does not know exists, currently valued at approximately $5.1 million. Which I established with her late best friend's husband in 2003 specifically because I suspected, even then, that my wife might one day try to do exactly what she is doing today. I have been waiting 22 years to be wrong about her. I am sorry to tell you I was right. Judge Caldwell composed herself. The whole courtroom had gone silent. Mr. Vale, she said, your client and I are going to have a long conversation. So is the district attorney, and so is the state bar regarding your own conduct. This hearing is adjourned. The respondent's counter-petition for divorce on grounds of fraud, financial abuse, and adultery will be heard in front of Judge Whitaker on February 3rd. The criminal matters will be referred to the district attorney's office today. The petitioner is ordered to surrender her passport before leaving this courtroom. Mr. Bishop, you are not to leave the state of North Carolina without written permission from this court. Bailiff. That was that. I'd love to tell you my wife collapsed, sobbing, or that Trent tried to run, or that Caleb burst into tears and ran to apologize to me. None of that happened. My wife sat down very slowly and stared at the table in front of her like it had personally betrayed her. Trent walked out of the courtroom, calling his lawyer. Caleb just sat there in the second row, not moving, not speaking, like a man waiting for the building to fall on him. The collapse came later. It came over the next 11 months in pieces. The criminal charges came down in March. My wife pled out to elder financial exploitation, conspiracy, and aggravated identity theft. She got 7 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 4. Trent Bishop went to trial because his lawyer believed in him longer than he should have. He was convicted on all 12 counts and sentenced to 12 years federal time, plus a restitution order of $2.3 million he will never be able to pay. Caleb, because he was younger and because his role was provable but secondary, took a plea for 4 years with the possibility of work release after 18 months. We recovered most of the money, $1.4 million through clawback orders against accounts Trent hadn't yet liquidated, another $600,000 through the LLC dissolution. The home equity line was voided. The forged signatures were thrown out of every document they touched. The house, which had been in my name alone since my mother left it to me in 1991, was never actually in play. They just thought it was. The trust Doug and I had set up paid for everything. The lawyers, the investigators, the forensic accountants, the new locks and the new alarm system, and the long, quiet months of putting my life back together. There was still plenty left when it was done. There always was. The hardest part wasn't the money. The hardest part was Caleb. He wrote me a letter from the county jail before he was transferred to prison. 5 pages, front and back, in handwriting that looked exactly like his mother's. He didn't ask me to forgive him. He asked me instead to tell him whether I had known when I was raising him that I wasn't his father. He wanted to know how long I had loved him under false pretenses, whether any of it had been real. I wrote him back. I told him that I had suspected since he was 3 weeks old, and that I had loved him anyway, and that the loving had been the only true thing in the whole arrangement, and that the man who had betrayed me was not him, but the woman who had taught him how to do it. I told him I would visit him in prison if he wanted me to. I told him that I had not raised him to be the man who had helped his mother try to lock me up for the money, and that if he could find his way back to being the man I had raised, there would be a chair waiting for him at my kitchen table. He wrote back 2 weeks later. He just said, "I'd like to be that man. Please come." I've been visiting him every other Sunday for the past 9 months. We don't talk much. We don't have to. He's 26 now, going on 27, and he's going to come out of prison at 30, and he's going to need a father. I am the only one he's ever had. His mother has written me from her own prison 3 times. I have not opened any of the letters. I keep them in the same coffee can on the workshop shelf where I used to keep my notebook. Maybe one day I will open them. Maybe one day I will burn them. I haven't decided. Trent Bishop, I am told, has been a difficult prisoner. He has filed 2 appeals and lost both. His business partners in Greenville lost everything. His 3rd wife, whom he had been planning to leave, my wife for once the money came through, found a different man within a month. He will be 63 years old when he comes out of federal prison, with nothing. I sold the bungalow in West Asheville. There were too many ghosts. I bought a smaller place outside Black Mountain with a workshop big enough to hold my tools and a porch big enough to watch the sun come up over the 7 Sisters. Maeve and I have dinner once a month. Augusto comes over sometimes to play chess. Doug's youngest daughter calls me every Sunday, and her kids call me Grandpa, which I did not expect and which I have stopped trying to talk them out of. I am 66 years old. I had a stroke. I lost a wife who turned out never to have really been one, and a son who turned out to be borrowed, and a life that turned out to have been built on a foundation I didn't quite trust even when I poured it. I am still here. I still wake up before sunrise. I still do the engineering calculations in my head while I drink my coffee. I still have a workshop and a porch and a trust fund and a name on the deed and a chair at the table for the young man who is going to come back to me in 3 years and ask me to help him become someone better than what his mother made him. They thought the stroke had taken everything from me. They were the ones who left with nothing.